But the problem I see today is that professional sport, and I have to tell you, I've worked with hundreds of professional athletes, and I'm saying this up front, the individuals that I worked with were extraordinary individuals. I'm talking about as whole people, body, mind, and spirit. They were fantastic. They were the kind of people you'd love to have as friends. But despite that, unfortunately, pro sport has become the poster child for vice. And you see them all. You see greed, lust, envy, pride, sloth. I'm leaving something out there. Gluttony, lust. Did I get them all? Anger. They're all there to be seen. And they're dominated, and because, again, these are the things that are put out to us, and maybe because of our exposure to the media now is so profound, it has the effect on us that maybe it wouldn't have if it was just once in a while you went to an event and you saw something. This, unfortunately, now has come down to the lower level. So college almost looks like, the minor leagues for the pros for most sports. High schools, you see a lot of the attitudes coming down, even down to the youth level. My son Joseph, some years ago, when we first moved here, we joined a little parish and had a very small school. Matter of fact, there was, I think maybe only 9 boys old enough to play basketball. So they had a basketball team. And when Joseph came, he was the 8th person on the basketball team. And basically, if you were a boy and you could walk and talk and breathe, you were on the basketball team. And they hadn't won a game apparently in 5 years. So I go over to the first game because I had to drive him over there, and so I'm sitting there, watching. And I've learned I really don't get involved at all in these things because I think it's just better to just kind of sit back. That's just my approach to it. And so I'm watching them warm up, and these poor guys, I'm thinking, ooh, okay, this is going to be something. The other team comes in. They got wristbands, matching headbands, matching uniforms, bags. They're in single file kind of marching in. They got 3 coaches. Another Catholic school, by the way. They get down the bench, and our guys are, trying to do the layup drill, and balls are ringing off the backboard and shooting out across the gym and so forth. And the other team is doing this weave exercise, they're doing like fancy ball drills, behind the back pass and everything. And I'm thinking, ooh, boy, this is going to be ugly. So the game gets going, and you can imagine what happens. It happened. And so with 2 minutes left to go in the game, they're losing by 32 points. Now, that's not bad enough. What happens next is what's really bad. The coach stands up after they just scored and says, press, press. Now, if anybody doesn't know basketball, press means that you are now going to have your entire team down on defense, not even allowing this other team to get the ball out of bounds. The team that you're beating by 32 points. Guess what happens? They steal the ball. They're now winning by 2 more points. It's 34 points that they're ahead. And the parents are standing up cheering their children for these great plays. And I'm thinking, I'm in the twilight zone. What is going on here? This is insanity. These are 2 Catholic schools. Something's wrong. Something's happened. Something is affecting us in a way that it shouldn't be. But the problem is not with sport. From a Catholic understanding of sport, I was invited, I guess this was going back now to 2004 or 5. John Paul II, before he died, in the Pontifical Council of the Laity, created a new section called Church and Sport. And basically what it was is the Catholic Church trying to come together to say, let's start to maybe more formally examine this thing of sport. In other words, what should it be? What does it mean? How would it be? How is it part of the church? And it was an amazing meeting. It shows me why it's challenging to get anything done, not just at the Vatican, but in the Catholic Church. Because in that meeting, you had something like 7 languages being spoken. We all had to wear headphones. There were interpreters. You had businessmen, politicians, athletes, coaches, philosophers, theologians. It was across the board, all speaking different languages, all from the 7 continents, all different backgrounds. And you start to say, okay, this may not be as simple as it looks. They're coming up with one vision for sport. But being that it is universal, Catholic, our understanding of sport, that means we need to understand it as much more than just we're going to say some prayers after a sporting event. And I'll talk about that in a moment. There's something more to it. We need to understand law, medicine, science. We need to understand business. All of these things. How do they impinge on sport? And I'll just read you this little thing. You may be familiar with Father Shaw, James Shaw, who is a philosopher out of Georgetown. Fantastic individual, great writer. And I'm just going to read you a couple of things. He talks about play. And he says, play, like creation itself, indicates what before us is unnecessary yet fascinating. Aristotle said that play was like contemplation, as it also was something for its own sake. He went on further. Games are not played for the primary purpose of the exercise of those who play them. They are played for themselves. They are played to win. In their unfolding and completion, the games themselves are what is fascinating. They need not be, but are. Games belong to the realm of superabundance. We don't need them to keep ourselves alive, not like food and water. Yet we delight in them because of what they are. And then he finishes, the nearest most of us get to contemplation is when we watch a good game. That should make some of you happy. So if anybody gives you a hard time about watching any sports from now on, you just say, I'm in contemplation. Here, in a way, we near what is best in ourselves. We are spectators not for any selfish reason, not for anything we might get out of the game, money or exercise or glory, but just because the game is there and we lose ourselves in its playing, either as players or spectators. This is not only should remind us that we are not sufficient unto ourselves, but that what is higher than we are, what is ultimately serious, is itself fascinating and joyful. Watching games, I suspect, teaches us something about what was once called homo ludens. Johann Huizinga, who I mentioned earlier, that was the book he wrote, Homo Ludens, and Father interprets it as the being that plays, or man the player. Sport is really an artificial environment. We made this stuff up. We take it so seriously. If somebody came down from another planet who had never seen us before and saw people hitting like white little balls around with sticks and grass and holes in the ground, they'd say, what is this? Who made this up? Yet we take it very seriously. This all means something. You know, basketball right now, I mean, we're way beyond the sport of basketball. We're into teams and what's going to happen and who's my favorite and did you see that game last night? I can't believe they did this or that. But sport needs to be properly directed from a Catholic perspective. And I think it needs to be a means for developing virtue. Now, when I say that, very often people think that I'm doing an either or. Either we're going to have world-class performance or we're going to be virtuous. Or we're going to be a holy roller or a goody two-shoes or something. No, they're not mutually exclusive. Matter of fact, in order to talk about this, I just have to talk about virtue just briefly. And I'm watching the time here. Of the virtues, the intellectual, moral, theological virtues, intellectual are the speculative. You have wisdom, understanding, science. Okay, the practical are art and prudence to some degree. I was at an NFL Players Association meeting doing a talk, a room full of NFL players, and I said to them, how many of you are trying to perfect the intellectual virtue of art? And they all looked at me like you are. Like, what? I said, how many of you are trying to perfect what you're doing as football players? Oh, yeah, that's me. I'm trying to do that, you know. That's the intellectual virtue of art. It's the right method of external production. Anything you're trying to perfect and do well, that's a virtue. That's fantastic. It's one of them. We need to have all of them because the virtues don't operate in isolation. They operate in an integrated way together. The moral virtues, justice, temperance, fortitude, prudence. Under justice, you have gratitude, religion, affability, piety, liberality, and many others. Let me just take one. Let me take gratitude. You know, we all think, I think in here, it's probably a good idea to be thankful for things. But let me just do this little exercise with you. You can either write it down or just do it in your mind. I want you to think for me, make a list of all the things that are invaluable in your life, that you couldn't put a dollar figure on. They're beyond worth to you. And I'm just going to give you a few seconds. Put the list together for me. You can write it down or just think of it in your mind if you don't have a pad or pen. I'll just give you a few seconds. Go ahead.